Hey guys, Luna here with a review, and today we have a really special video. This video is actually about one of my favorite albums of all time and one of the most underrated albums in history. Of course, we're talking about Just Another Diamond Day by Vashti Bunyan. The year is 1970, although the songwriting process for this album started all the way back in 1968, 2 years prior to the release of the album. Before we get into the actual music and the reasons why this album is so incredible and actually has turned out to be one of my favorite albums ever, we first gotta talk about the history of this album because this is a really interesting release. Today, we see this album as one of the most important freak folk influences of all time, but back in the day, it was actually a really big disappointment not only for the label, but also for Vashti herself. Actually, so disappointed she was with this album that she decided to quit the music industry for good. This decision would only be temporary, although she wouldn't know, because then by the year 2000, early 2000s, let's say, the album had grown a small cult, small they became big, so big that actually pleased Vashti, and she decided to release another album and start a new phase in her musical career. During this 30 years, she dedicated basically to raise her own children. She didn't do any live performances or any other songs. All she ever did was taking care of her child. Thank God that people got to know this album and grew to appreciate it that much, because it's for that we have two amazing new albums by Vashti Bunyan. Well, new, but recent albums by Vashti Bunyan that are almost as good as this one. Now, even though the story is really interesting as well, the main part, the great part about this album is how amazing the music is. If I ever were to tell you that this album was released in a modern era, let's say 2010s, you wouldn't have any reason to tell me that that is not true unless you actually know when it was released. And the fact is that even though this album was released all the way back in 1970, it sounds really fresh, not only because of Vashti's songwriting and the fact that acoustic albums have always existed, but also because of how amazing the production of this album is. Every single thing on this album sounds perfect. You can hear every single breathy tone that comes out of Vashti's mouth. You can hear every strength from the guitar. The things that I just mentioned are one of the reasons why Vashti is often called the grandmother of freak folk. You know, that same genre that spawned an artist like Joanna Newsom, for example. This woman was one of the first ones to ever do it in such a beautiful way. Often people compare this album to Nick Drake's albums back in the day. Imagine the quality of the album, and I'm telling you, the only thing that these albums have in common are basically that they are both acoustic albums, but the chord progression, the songwriting, and even the production are way different from one another. But of course, I can totally understand the comparisons because these albums were, released around the same time, so yeah, I understand that part. Because this is an acoustic album, the songwriting is really important, more important than ever. That's one of the reasons why folk is one of my favorite genres, if not my favorite, because the songwriting is so important. You need to have such an amazing songwriting skill to make an album that basically the only thing that joins your voice is a guitar, and still make an album that's entertaining and not boring at all. Every single song on this album sounds like a lullaby because Vashti sings in such a low, breathy tune, but that doesn't take anything away from how interesting this album is. Now, one of the reasons why this is true is because the album is only 31 minutes long. It's not such a long album, and the tracks in the album are about a minute and a half, 2 minutes and a half, but never too long. So every single track is enjoyable, and even though it can be a little bit repetitive at times, you completely accept it because of how beautiful it is. If it was like a track that only acoustic and really low and breathy that lasted 5 minutes, I would tell you, yeah, that's a bit too much. But no, it's only 2 minutes long, so it's perfectly timed so you can enjoy it and not get bored of it. Because let me tell you, I've heard this album about 25,000 times. I mean, I hear this album really often because of how beautiful and how short and sweet it is. I love this album. I love it. I love it. I love it. The lyrics in this album are just really childish, but go perfectly with the nostalgia-filled songs or the nostalgia-filled songwriting that Vashti delivers. Often when you listen to this type of songwriting that's so melodic and so beautiful and so dreamy, the first thing that comes to mind, at least for me, is childhood memories. Memories when we were happy, memories when we were just kids, innocent kids. I'm gonna place a few lyrics here on the screen so you know how beautiful the songwriting in this album is. But that is the thing, I mean, these childish storytelling songs are so beautiful and hit so close to home for me that it makes this album such a beautiful experience every single time. And as I said before, I have heard this album too many times for my own good. Also, even though this is mainly, or well, not mainly, entirely an acoustic album, there are some other instruments that are thrown there to make the song even better. For example, on the intro track Diamond Day, you have a flute at the beginning of the track, and the flute is actually what introduces Vashti's voice, and it's just so beautiful. You also have violins, banjos. I mean, there's a great variety of instruments too, even though the main instrument is the acoustic guitar and is the one that you probably remember the most from this album. Still, these little things, these little production decisions thrown out there, like the flute in the intro track, they make the experience way better. And I think that this sort of minimalist things added to the track are what's missing in Vashti's new projects that really good, but not half as good as this album is. The only reason that I can understand why this album isn't as popular as, I don't know, an album from Nick Drake, for example, the fact that Vashti has not died or didn't die at a young age, because let me tell you, the album is incredibly good, and in my opinion, really, this album is even better than any Nick Drake album, and I am a really big fan of Nick Drake's discography, but I must be honest, I think this album is way better. Although I don't think that this album is as influential as some people quote it to be, I do feel that it's impressive that an album so old can sound so fresh, to the point where if I tell you that this album was released yesterday, you would completely believe me, because the album, from the production to the songwriting to the concept, is incredibly timeless, and it would sound fresh, I believe, in any era that you put it in. I love this album. I am in love with every single song in here. I don't think there's a highlight on this album. Every single song is amazing. There's one song that I don't think is that good, and it's the a cappella thing she did on Window Over the Bay. But except for that, every single song on this album is perfect. And I hope that more people listen to this album, because this album doesn't get the attention it deserves. In my opinion, one of the best folk albums I've heard, and believe me, I've heard a few. So, in terms of rating, I cannot give this album anything less than an amazingly big and incredibly deserved 10. That is it for today's video, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like on the video. I want to know your opinion on this album. If you haven't heard it, please give it a try, because it's amazing. And then come back to this video and leave a comment of what you thought about the album. I'm curious to know. And then make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other video that I upload. So yeah, I guess I see you next time. Bye!